Hello out there again, everybody. This is Marvelous Mark. Not talking about wrestling this time. I'm going to start my series on my college basketball previews. Starting with the ACC, I'm also going to do the Big 12 coming up later this week, and I'm also going to do singular previews for the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Northern Iowa Panthers. So, with that being said, and without further ado, I will start this time with the ACC, and in the order I'm doing my team previews, I'm starting them in like how I think they're going to finish in the conference. So let's go now, shall we? Okay, the first team I'm going to cover is right here, the Duke Blue Devils. That's right, baby. And I can get how people love to hate Duke. I mean, because you can really liken the Duke Blue Devils basketball team to like the New York Yankees in baseball, the LA Lakers in basketball, in football like the Dallas Cowboys, and maybe in college football like the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Because those are teams that you really don't have a gray area with them. You either love them or you hate them. And I can kind of ration it off like on both sides of the spectrum, because I hate the Yankees, I hate the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, but I love the Lakers, and I love Duke, as you can tell by my hat. But as far as how I think they're going to be this year, before I get into that, I'll just tell a little bit about what happened to them last year. Last year they went 27-7. They went 13-3 in the ACC. They ended up getting beat in the round of 64 by C.J. McCollum and Lehigh by the count of 75-70. And that's only the second time since 1996 that Duke has lost their opening NCAA tournament game. And as far as the team goes, there's 4 seniors on this team that are returning. Seth Curry, who is an excellent three-point shooter, like his brother Stephen Curry, who plays for the Golden State Warriors now, and his father Dell Curry, who did this for many years for the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA. And okay, then another one is Andre Dawkins, who is taking a red shirt this year, probably because there's a lot of talent coming in, which I'll get to here in a minute. And Mason Plumlee, who could have gone pro after last year like his brother Miles. And I expect him to have a big year in the low post. And also Ryan Kelly, who's a 6'11" guy who can also shoot threes, but he can also help down the low post as well. And speaking of Miles Plumlee, him and Austin Rivers went to the NBA this year. They were both drafted in the first round. And they got 2 true freshmen coming in this year. Duke didn't have much of a recruiting class because they didn't really need to have one, but they got a 6'4" guard named Rashid Suleiman, who was a McDonald's All-American last year. And also they got a 6'8" wingman from Philadelphia named Emil Jefferson. And also, there is another Plumlee in the Duke program this year. He's a redshirt freshman named Marshall Plumlee, and he is the youngest of the 3 brothers, and he is more your low post player, unlike Miles and Mason Plumlee, who also can play outside. But as far as what I expect out of them this year, I believe that they should at least contend for the ACC title, if not win it. And as far as the NCAA tournament goes, I think if they don't get to at least the Sweet 16, it'll be a disappointment. Okay, the next team I'm going to talk about is the NC State Wolfpack and Coach Mark Gottfried. Last year, this team went 24-13. They went 9-7 in the ACC. And they had a surprising run in the NCAA tournament where they got to the Sweet 16 and they narrowly lost to Kansas 60-57. And Mark Gottfried up until a couple years ago, he had been an ESPN analyst on their college basketball telecast, and this job was good enough to make him leave, I guess. So one player you have to watch is C.J. Leslie. Last year he averaged 14.7 points a game and 7.3 rebounds, and he also had 1.6 blocks a game, and he is primed to be a ACC candidate for ACC Player of the Year, as it were. And their recruiting class was very good. They got 3 McDonald's All-Americans out of this class. You have Tyler Lewis, who's a guard who comes from Oak Hill Academy in Mount Wilson, Virginia, and they're pretty much one of the top high school programs year in, year out. Then you have the hometown boy Rodney Purvis, who's a forward. Then you have a swingman type of player in T.J. Warren, who went to Brewster Academy up in New Hampshire, that's another big high school basketball program, kind of a prep school type of thing. They were ranked in the preseason top 10, and if you saw the preseason polls, might be a little bit too high for them, but as far as what I think they're going to do in the conference this year, I think they have enough talent to contend for the ACC title and make some kind of a run in the ACC tournament, and also into the NCAA tournament. This team probably has the best chance. This is probably the best chance that they've had to win the ACC since like 1989, 1990, when they had Chris Carciani and Rodney Monroe in their backcourt. So I expect a lot of things out of this team this year. Okay, the next team I'm going to talk about is the North Carolina Tar Heels. Last year, this team won 32-6 and won the ACC title. And they ended up getting to the Elite Eight, where they lost to Kansas by a count of 80-67. Player to watch on this team is forward James Michael McAdoo. And if this name sounds familiar, it should, because his father also played at UNC back in the day, and he had quite a career in the NBA as well. And one thing he's gonna have to do is pick up the slack left by the departure of such luminaries as Harrison Barnes, John Henson, Kendall Marshall, and Tyler Zeller. I mean, he's not going to have to pick up all of their slack, but he's going to have to at least pull his weight. And one thing I can say about Roy Williams, and being from Iowa, is that he, in the last 10 years or so, he's recruited Iowa very well. I mean, yeah, Iowa's not really a hotbed of recruiting talent so much, but he's picked quite a few good players out of Iowa. When he was at Kansas, he was able to recruit people like Rafe LaFrance, who had a pretty solid career in the NBA. And then you got Kirk Heinrich. And then you also have Nick Collison. Then since he's been at North Carolina, he had the aforementioned Harrison Barnes, who he plucked out of Iowa State's home backyard in Ames, Iowa. And this year is no different, because he got a guard from Marion, Iowa, from last year's state champions in Iowa, Lynmar High School, and Marcus Page. So he's really done a good job in Iowa. But as far as what I expect out of this team this year, the ACC might be a little bit down this year, but as far as what I think North Carolina is going to do, I think they're going to be right in the mix for the ACC championship like they normally are. But I don't really expect them to win it this year. But with that said, I think they're still going to make the NCAA tournament, because that's just what they do. And they may not get the Elite Eight this year, but they probably won't come too far from it either. Alright, the next team I'm going to talk about is the Florida State Seminoles. Last year, this team went 25-10, and they went 12-4 in the ACC, and they ended up losing in the round of 32 to Cincinnati by a count of 62-56. And one thing you can say about this team last year is that They beat Duke and North Carolina twice last year. They beat them both times, and that's something that very few teams have been able to do, like in the course of an ACC season. Player to watch on this team is guard Michael Snare, who had a breakout year last year. In my estimation, he averaged 14 points a game, and he was a 40% three-point shooter, and he made about 85% of his free throws. So he's one of the best free throw shooters in the nation, and he is arguably their best defensive player as well. And even with the loss of the couple of big players from last year, Bernard James and Xavier Gibson, there's still plenty of talent on this team to make a run at the big dance. I think they will get there. Alright, next I'm going to talk about the Miami Hurricanes. Last year this team went 20-13. They had a winning record in the ACC, going 9-7. But that didn't equate into a trip to the NCAA tournament now, did it? They ended up getting to the second round of the NIT, where they lost to Minnesota by the count of 78-60. And a couple of players to watch on this team. One of them is center Reggie Johnson. If this guy could ever play to his potential, he could be not only one of the top centers in the ACC, but he could probably be one of the top centers in the nation. Yeah, I kind of liken him to a former Iowa State player named Kelvin Cato, and the fact that there were games that, like the game against Duke back in February last year, where he had 27 points and 12 rebounds. He's basically an unstoppable force. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, where he was pretty much an invisible man on some nights. So you really couldn't gauge what you were going to get from him from night to night. So, and then another guy to watch is Duran Scott, who is basically the heart and soul of the U's team. And I think part of the reason why Miami didn't get into the NCAA tournament last year is because he was suspended during the ACC tournament last year, and so that could have been a factor into that. So, as far as what I think that they're going to do this year, they can be an NCAA tournament team as long as Reggie Johnson plays up to his potential, and as long as other people step up, they should be able to make the tournament, and probably be surprised if they don't. Okay, the next team I'm going to talk about is the Maryland Terrapins, who won 17-15 last year, and 6-10 in the ACC, which equaled no postseason for them. And one big loss they had from last year is the departure of Terrell Stoglin, who all he did was lead the ACC in scoring last year. So that's a big loss there. Player to watch on this team, as far as their recruiting goes, is center Shaquille Clear. Excuse me. He's a big body that can get it done in the low post, and he kind of brings a dimension to this team that they didn't have last year. And he is the top recruit in their class, for their recruiting class this year. And as far as what I think they're going to do this year, this is a really young team. They have no juniors on this team. This team is mainly freshmen and sophomores, so it's going to be tough for them to make headway in this conference this year. But look out for them in a couple of years. They might be able to start making noise again. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Virginia Cavaliers and Coach Tony Bennett. Last year this team went 22-10, 9-7 in the ACC, which equaled a trip to the NCAA tournament, where they got soundly thrashed in the round of 64 by Florida, 71-45. One big loss on this team is forward Mike Scott, who basically did everything but print tickets for this team last year. He was the runner-up for ACC Player of the Year. And one thing that Tony Bennett has been able to do, he's got 3 top 100 recruits coming in this year, including Justin Anderson, who he might be the most ready player in this class to make an impact right away. And one thing you know about a Tony Bennett team, he got this from his father, Dick Bennett, who coached at Wisconsin Green Bay for the longest time. You know that they will play defense, and that may be enough for them to make maybe not the NCAA tournament this year, but they should definitely be able to get into the NIT. So that's what I think they're going to do this year. Okay, the next team I'm going to talk about is the Clemson Tigers. Last year, this team went 16-15, and they went 8-8 in the ACC, but they did not get to the postseason at all. And I don't know if it's going to get too much better for them this year, considering that they lost their top 2 scorers from last year. And and kind of like Maryland, this is a really young team. Also, their team has consisted mainly of freshmen and sophomores. So, and this is a team that it still has never, and I repeat, never won at North Carolina. The final count escapes me, but I think it's like 0-54 or something like that in their history. So, wow, that's, you talk about one team having another team's number. There you go. But as far as what I think they're going to do this year, I think it'll be a success if they get into the NIT. I don't think they have a shot at the NCAAs this year. So, okay, the next team I'm going to talk about is the Virginia Tech Hokies, who went 16-17 last year and 4-12 in the ACC. And they have a new coach this year after the firing of one Seth Greenberg. The new coach this year is James Johnson, who was a Virginia Tech assistant for the past 5-6 seasons. And one thing I will say about this team is they've only got 8 scholarship players this year. They've had a little bit of attrition with the coaching change, as you might expect, but the best player on this team is a second-team ACC player from last year named Eric Green. But they seem to think they can make the NCAA tournament, but I don't think so. In fact, I have a hard time believing they're going to make any kind of a postseason tournament this year. So that's just my opinion. Okay, next I'm going to touch on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and Coach Jeff Bzdelik. This team went 13-18 last year and 4-12 in the ACC. And over the last couple of years, they've only won 5 conference games. They've been 5-27. Ooh, normally that's not very conducive for a coach keeping his job. So you'd have to think that Coach Bzdelik would definitely be on the hot seat this year. So he's pretty much needs to win, and he needs to win a lot this year. And another thing is that Tim Duncan is not coming through that door. Chris Paul is not coming through this door. And Randolph Childress isn't coming through that door either. So my guess is that there'll be no postseason for Wake Forest this year, which means they'll have a new coach next year. That's just my opinion. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and Coach Brian Gregory. Last year this team won 11-20 overall and 4-12 in the ACC. And lately, appearances in the Big Dance have been hard to come by. They've only made it once in the last 5 years. And it's really kind of below par for this team, because this is a team that's, it was just 8 years ago. They were in the national championship against UConn. Yeah, they didn't win that game, but they got there. But as far as what I think about them this year in 2012, 2013, don't see them doing anything this year, really. I think it's going to be a pretty tough year for this team, I think. Okay, and finally, I'm going to talk about the Boston College Eagles, who last year they were a dreadful 9-22 and 4-12 in the ACC last year. A key loss for this team last year, or for this year, is Matt Humphrey, who averaged just over 10 points a game last year. As far as what I think about them this year, I don't think they're going to improve too much over that. Especially when you're only averaging 59 points a game. I mean, that's not good. I mean, when you're only averaging that kind of points a game, it's like it doesn't really matter what kind of how good a defense you're playing, because more often than not, a team's going to score more than 59 points a game. So. And last year they were 323rd out of all Division I teams, which is not very good at all. So, anyway, this concludes my first round of previews. For this time, I cover the ACC. Coming up next time, I will cover the Big 12 in its entirety. So, with that said, this is Marvelous Mark from the Off the Rope Show, signing off for now. And I will talk to you later.